Did you know that Ukraine is blackmailing the West over Crimea, and a shipbuilding plant is being cut up for scrap metal, while Russian disinformation has some advice for American protesters? Welcome to StopFake, the place where we dissect fakes about Ukraine and a little more. So let's get to it. Political blackmail. That is what RT called a recent resolution that Ukraine's parliament enacted, calling on the United Nations and other international organizations to commemorate the victims of the Crimean Tatar genocide and condemn Russia's continued violation of Crimean Tatars' rights and freedoms. On June the 2nd, Ukraine's parliament enacted a resolution aimed at the United Nations, the European Parliament, the Council of Europe, the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly, and other governments and organizations to draw their attention to the human and national rights violations taking place in Russian-occupied Crimea, and to recognize the 1944 deportation of Crimean Tatars as a genocide. RT treats the resolution with disdain, calling it meaningless and a quote-unquote hopeless dead end. RT denies Ukraine's assertion that Russia continues to aggressively militarize the Crimean Peninsula and violates the rights of Crimean Tatars and ethnic Ukrainians without reprieve. But RT faithfully repeats the Kremlin mantra about the ineffectiveness of Russia's sanctions and the disinformation narrative about the voluntary reunification of Crimea with the Russian Federation. RT also claims that Ukraine's call to increase sanctions against Russia are falling on deaf ears because more and more countries are cozying up to Russia, that the world community is eager to get rid of sanctions and get back to business as usual. However, the publication completely ignores the 1944 Crimean Tatar deportation, something that features very prominently in the Ukrainian parliamentary statement. Now, Russia's militarization of Crimea and the unrelenting violation of human rights on the peninsula have been called out by the European Union and the United Nations and many other international organizations. In March of 2020, EU High Representative Josep Borrell issued a statement on Crimea and Sevastopol where he noted that, quote, 6 years on from the illegal annexation of the Autonomous Republic of Crimea and the city of Sevastopol by the Russian Federation, the European Union remains steadfast in its commitment to Ukraine's sovereignty and territorial integrity. The European Union reiterates that it does not recognize and continues to condemn this violation of international law. The statement also points out that, quote, the increasing militarization of the peninsula continues to negatively impact the security situation in the Black Sea region. In violation of international humanitarian law, Russian citizenship and conscription in the armed forces of the Russian Federation have been imposed on Crimean residents. Continued Russian aggression, violation of human rights in occupied Crimea were also discussed at the UN General Assembly in February of 2020. The Crimean Human Rights Group conducts monitoring and documentation of human rights violations and war crimes in Crimea, as do international human rights organizations such as Human Rights Watch. The Russian site Anti-Fascist announced this week that the ocean shipbuilding plant in Mykolayiv is being cut down for scrap metal, and this piece of fake news was quickly picked up and further disseminated by Facebook. Neither Anti-Fascist nor any of the Facebook reposts provide any evidence of the claim. They all cite a source from the social media Telegram site, while in reality, the ocean shipbuilding plant management refutes this claim and says the plant is working, new ships are being built, and old ones repaired. A local newscast by the Mykolayiv branch of Ukraine's public broadcaster Suprun shows the ocean shipbuilding plant vibrantly working. The plant continues to repair ships and install new equipment. The Bukh vessel project, which stood in dock for 10 years, has been revived. Indeed, over the past year, work at the plant has intensified considerably. In April of this year, ocean shipbuilders completed the construction of 2 barges ordered by the Netherlands Eurobulk company. In August of last year, the company successfully completed repairs on a Palau-owned cargo ship, and earlier this year, ocean builders carried out repairs and refurbishing on the Chinese cargo vessel Sigma. In fact, the ocean shipbuilding plant also fulfills local Ukrainian infrastructure orders, such as bridges and bypass roads. According to the Nikvisti Mykolayiv news portal, in 2020, the ocean plant carried out repairs on 5 vessels and built 2 barges, handled 22 cargo operations, and moved 90,000 tons of cargo. The ocean shipbuilding plant was privatized in 2000 and has changed owners several times. In December of 2018, the plant changed hands for the 4th time. According to Mykolayiv City Mayor Alexander Sienkiewicz, the once profitable plant was first sold to a Dutch company in 2000, who in turn sold it to a Norwegian firm in 2004, which then sold ocean to a Russian company. Ocean went into severe decline under Russian ownership and was brought to near bankruptcy. Jobs were lost, and the company's debt grew to nearly $4 million. The new owner, the former director of the Mykolayiv port, has already invested $1.5 million in Ocean's modernization. And to end this edition, let's take a look at how Russia is presenting the protests against police brutality that have swept across America after George Floyd died in police custody in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Our colleagues at EU vs. Disinfo have followed this story very closely. Pro-Kremlin media are alleging that the riots are orchestrated by the Democratic Party based on its color revolution manuals, that the riots are similar to the 2014 coup in Kyiv. Calling the Euromaidan protests a coup has been an integral part of Russia's disinformation about Ukraine to create the impression that Ukraine is a client state of the West, the EU, or someone else, or that Ukraine is a failed state. It's part of a conspiracy theory that the Colored Revolutions manual is a reference to the pro-democracy revolutions that took place in Georgia, Ukraine, and other countries in the early 2000s that were part of an American plot for world domination, of course. Sputnik claimed that, quote, Russia has never interfered in American affairs and will not intervene now, referring, of course, to the 2016 U.S. election in which Russian meddling has been proven. Now, reports by Russian state-sponsored media on American soil appear to sympathize with the protesters, but the state media outlets in Russia paint a very different picture. A notable example was an article written for the Russian tabloid Komsomolskaya Pravda by Dmitry Stashin. In it, Stashin mocks American protesters by referring to quote-unquote muscular criminal Negroes and describes twerking as the quote-unquote national Negro dance. Stashin then posted the same text on social media with the caption, kindly advice to the Negroes of Minnesota and the United States, beat the whites until they turn black. That post was subsequently shared on Telegram by Margarita Simonyan. Who is Margarita Simonyan? She's the editor-in-chief of RT. And this development was exposed for English audiences in a tweet by Bellingcat. Now, rather than apologize for this blatant display of racism, RT doubled down and attacked Bellingcat instead, falsely accusing the open-source investigative group of fueling U.S. race riots. Regardless of how the situation evolves on the ground in the United States, pro-Kremlin media is bound to continue focusing on the events and using them for their own objectives, possibly as part of an ongoing campaign to influence the upcoming U.S. election. Campaigns like this have in the past targeted black communities in particular. In 2019, for example, the Digital Forensic Research Lab completed a report called Operation Secondary Infection that looked at 7 case studies that focused on different aspects of this special operation, from exploiting divisions in Ireland to campaigns aimed at fueling anti-immigrant sentiment in Germany. That's it for this week. As always, you can find much more dissected disinformation on our website, StopFake.org. Keep your eyes open for fakes and don't listen to Russian disinformation, because washing your hands and social distancing will in fact protect you from the coronavirus. And if you spot any disinformation about Ukraine, forward it to us for a truth autopsy. I'm Marko Suprun, and this is StopFake. Thanks for watching.